Steven Roy Goodman, host of Higher Education Today, a production of the University of the District of Columbia. Welcome back to the education program that connects you to contemporary issues, people, and institutions involved in the world of higher education. Today we'll be talking about civic education and civic engagement. Jeff Harris is Chief Executive Officer of the Junior Statesmen Foundation, an organization that prepares high school students for civic leadership in college and beyond. Formerly called Junior State of America, JSA has had over 500,000 members since its founding in 1934. Jeff is a political science graduate of the University of California, Berkeley. Jennifer Johnson is Assistant Director of the Lindy Center for Civic Engagement at Drexel University. The Lindy Center facilitates community-based civic engagement opportunities for students in Philadelphia. Last year, Jennifer ran a service immersion program in which 10 Drexel students built an urban farm in West Philadelphia. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks again for coming on.
Absolutely.
Well, Jennifer, if we could start with you, what is civic engagement, and how do we teach civic engagement?
Sure. So what I tell my 18-year-old students, civic engagement, I define it for them. I say civic engagement, people coming together over issues of public concern, communities identifying the issues that affect them most, and then figuring out what to do about it. So at Drexel, we approach civic engagement from many different angles. We have our academic angle. We have a curriculum designated just to civic engagement, so students can really get some meat behind what they're learning and what they're seeing out in the community. We have a co-curricular and extracurricular set of programming. Students can actually go volunteer, see what's going on in the community firsthand. And then we also have institutional commitments. Drexel really puts its weight behind being civically engaged and making sure that that we're being good stewards to our community.
Fair enough. But who defines what a good is in that regard? You use the word public.
Sure. So I think it depends upon the community. Community can be defined as broadly as the city of Philadelphia. It could drill down to a subset of individuals at Drexel University. So it's up to that individual community to decide what exactly the issue of public concern is that they're looking to work towards.
Fair enough. And Jeff, if we can bring you into this, sure. You run a fairly large organization.
Yes.
That defines public in a whole host of ways, because you're dealing with lots and lots of students around the country from very different backgrounds.
Yes.
How do you define public, and what is interesting to the public as it relates to students in particular?
Well, in JSA, we're as a nonpartisan organization involving students, like you said, from all over the country, all sorts of different backgrounds. Really, there's a notion that you're involved in a public good or in civics. Anytime you step out your front door, or these days turn on the internet and start interacting through blogs and things like that. Public good or civics engagement really, like she said, sort of depends on what an individual student or an individual person really gets motivated to get involved in. A public good could be anything from figuring out how to get a new stop sign on a corner or worrying about what's going on internationally. A lot of students today really are looking at international affairs and trying to become world citizens.
Well, but how do we help students do that then? And how does JSA do that in particular?
Well, JSA, as a nonpartisan, again, civic learning education foundation, does that in a couple of different ways. Our core program is our JSA chapters on about 500 different high schools across the country. The organization is student-run, and that's really important because the students are gaining organizational skills and leadership skills by putting on their own programs. And it's this through this method, giving them that experience, gives them those democratic values on how to pull people together, how to deal with differences amongst people, and how to resolve those differences in a civil way. More important than the individual issues that they're talking about, these skills, just the fact that they're able to come together across many different lines and work on an issue together, come to a conclusion and move forward to solve a problem, those are the types of skills that citizens need, after they turn 18 and are able to vote and fully participate in our democracy.
Well, it seems to me that that's a difficult issue. If you think about some of the major political issues of our day, let's take abortion, for instance, right? Very contentious issue. How do you resolve that in terms of a discussion? And how do we teach students how to be respectful of other people's positions while still having the ability to advocate for what they believe is right?
Well, that's an interesting question. Something that we definitely face on college campuses as students are starting to form their own opinions about life. You know, they come to college with a set of values that perhaps their parents have instilled in them or their religious background has instilled in them. And so at college, we like students to really take a hard look at those values. And the best way, you know, is open conversation, letting students know this is an educational opportunity for them, that there are going to be different opinions. You know, the issue of abortion, very polarizing issue. You know, we at Drexel have students on both sides of that issue, and we have students that are in the middle too. So I think just creating a safe space for students to explore, learn, talk about the issues a little bit more, and become firm in their standing, because that's what it's about, you know, them forming their own opinions.
I think combining the learning aspect, getting the knowledge behind an issue in an academic setting, which we do at some of our summer programs, which we can talk about later, plus giving the students the chance, the experience of actually coming together and discussing that issue in a tolerant, like she said, and safe environment. Public speaking skills are important, but listening skills are as important. We like to think that our students come together and learn from each other by having an open mind, no matter what side of the issue they're on. Our students disagree on just about everything. That's one of the things that makes our activities so exciting sometimes. But they do so in a way that emphasizes respect for each other, respect for what's being said. It's a little bit different from sometimes what you see on the cable news shows, where people are often screaming and yelling at each other. At JSA conferences and conventions, you'll often hear students yell out, respect the speaker, when things get a little too heated and maybe a little out of control.
Well, but how do we do that? How do we actually do that? I mean, you both mentioned listening and safe. You mentioned listening and you mentioned safe.
Yeah.
Sure.
How do we create a safe environment to have a discussion? Do we just put up a sign that says it's now safe? Or how do we really do that?
Sure. Well, an effective way that I've found working with groups, and not necessarily large groups, but let's say a group of 20, 25 students, let them set their ground rules. They want to have a productive conversation, so ask them, what do we need to do today to be effective in our communication? Write them up on a piece of paper, slap it on the wall, and go from there. They'll say things, respect the speaker. They'll say, let everyone have a chance to talk. I mean, they'll put up their own rules, and I think we can go from there. And then you just refer to them and let students, monitor their own behavior.
I fully agree. Setting the broad expectations that people are going to come together and work together and discuss some of these really difficult issues is the first step. What I've noticed is that when students do get together, they self-correct very well. I think there's a notion that there always needs to be an adult in the room, or there needs to be a lot of strict ground rules. Young people are amazing in their ability to work together and talk together, I think in a way that sometimes adults don't. So one of the gratifying things that I found over my career is just watching these students get together and talk about these issues in an enlightened way and in a respectful way, so that after the debate, they can agree to disagree, and then they go out and have fun together. They're good friends.
And they respect each other's position, I think.
Yeah.
But let's assume that you're right about this.
Okay.
You in particular, Jeff.
Sure.
What do we do? Do we just say, do we dissolve Congress and say Congress should now be only people under 18?
No, I don't think so, although that would be very interesting. I like to say that in many of our speakers programs, we have politicians come in and talk to our students. Many of them start with saying, when I was in high school, I didn't have an opportunity like this. I didn't have a club like this, which gets me thinking, what if everyone who was in Congress had the opportunity as a young person to learn how to discuss those issues, learn how to listen to each other without screaming, without blocking out the other side? What would Congress look like then? I think it would look different. So through our organization, and I'm sure organizations like Jennifer's, we're hoping to really impart on a young generation the need to engage civilly and tackle these tough issues, because that's the only way as a democracy, as a nation, we're going to come together and really move forward.
But what if something's outside the mainstream? What if, like, for instance, I am advocating for something that is so far out of the political mainstream that the vast majority of people in our contemporary society would say that it's dangerous, it's physically harmful, and it's going to harm society in a profound way? How do we deal with those thoughts?
Okay, well, speaking in the college population that I do deal with, sometimes the radical thought does come up with them, and I think maybe find out where they're coming from initially, try to gauge what the situation is there. But there are points at a university where we do have to back off a little bit, where it's not necessarily our place to be involved in issues. And we do set those boundaries up with students in the very beginning. For example, we don't, we are bipartisan in nature. We don't engage in political activities for obvious reasons. The same holds true. We're a non-denominational institution. So we stay away from religious banter, definitely. So I think we just have to set those parameters for ourselves. If students are misguided in their thinking, perhaps we can point them in the right direction. But being in an institution, there definitely is some parameters we do need to abide by.
And how do you handle those parameters, Jeff?
Well, we certainly have some parameters, but the overriding guide is a healthy respect for freedom of speech. Rather than shut down a student who might be outside of the mainstream, allowing that student to voice their opinions, to talk to other students, gives them a chance to get whatever it is off of their mind. It also gives the students who might not agree with them, probably most of the students in the room, if we're talking about issues like you mentioned, a chance to figure out where is this person coming from. If, again, we enter into the room with the idea that everyone, is there for the right reasons, that they want to share their opinions, and that their opinions have some valid, origin. Just trying to figure out where this sort of odd idea came from, what happened in the student's background that led them to this conclusion. That can be a healthy process because the understanding that comes from the critical thinking behind trying to figure out a person's motivation can help inform the majority to understand the minority's rights.
But what if I'm motivated to convince other people of my position? In fact, that's the whole reason I joined XYZ organization.
Sure.
I want you to have my position, and therefore I'm asking you to get involved and advocate in the same way that I'm advocating.
That's fine. I mean, all the students are free to advocate and try to persuade their peers. Their peers and high school students in general, young people, I find, aren't necessarily sheep that attach themselves to the loudest person in the room or the most popular person in the room. They've analyze the issues and they think for themselves. It's like, do I really agree with this person? They might be a very charismatic speaker and a very popular person, but I've seen some of the most popular people who are expressing unpopular opinions, students sort of gravitate away from that opinion. It's like they respect your opinion and you're a great speaker, but at the end of the day, people are free to disagree or agree and walk away from the person who's trying to persuade them, or join their cause.
Well, if we can talk a little bit about civic engagement on a less political level, perhaps on a service level, that's an interesting thing that I've noticed with my students in the last few years, where a lot of students are really interested in hands-on service engagement, where I'm working on something with my hands as opposed to just the theoretical. And Jennifer, I know you've been involved in an urban farm in Philadelphia. Maybe if you can say a word or two about that, and also how some of your students are dealing with this hands-on movement.
Sure. So we find a lot of our students, this millennial generation, coming in with service experience in high school, something that they've been exposed to, it's something they're familiar with. They may not always understand why they're doing it. Sometimes the thought process is it's going to help me get into college, or it's going to help me make my next goal in life. So they're not really getting the whole issue at hand. But the idea with the urban farm, it's an issue that I'm very passionate about and very excited about. The topic of food and food insecurity. Well, Food to college students, great topic. They understand it. So when we introduce the idea of food security to them, that there are people who do not know where their week's worth of groceries are coming from for a whole multitude of reasons. Not having access to the finances to buy them, having a disability that prohibits them from getting to somewhere to buy them, not having the transportation to get where they need to go to buy them, living in a food desert, which are often found in urban environments, areas where there's just not access to fresh, healthy, accessible food. It resonates with students. They get it. You see that aha moment with them. So the idea of the urban farm, there's a great organization in Philadelphia called Urban Tree Connection, and they have an urban farm in Philadelphia. It's about an acre large, right in the middle of West Philly. You would never know it's there. It's hidden from view from the street by perimeter of buildings, but they grow all kinds of stuff in there, and they're engaging the community. They're having the community come in, work at the farm. They're providing the produce to low-income families and getting it out into the community where it's really needed. So having students engage on that issue is huge. They understand it. It's definitely interesting. I think what we did for our particular project, our students built the urban farm. So they built some beds and filled them and got ready for the growing season.
That sounds very interesting.
Yeah.
Are other campuses doing anything like that you know of?
Not off the top of my head, but I'm sure it's a hot button issue right now, the idea of access to healthy food. So I'm sure that other campuses are engaging on the issue.
And Jeff, do you serve healthy food to JSA participants?
We certainly try to, but it is worth noting that many of our active JSA chapters are doing more than just debating issues. They're engaged in community service as well. I was telling Jennifer earlier, one of our chapters last year in Watchung Hills, New Jersey, built a community farm on their campus and raised vegetables and donated to a local food shelter. So I think it's a natural progression for many of our students who are debating these public policy issues. This generation is very engaged and wants to be active, like you said. So after the debate, after the talking, it naturally leads many of our students to actually want to do something.
Well, fair enough. If we can move then to the step of doing something, what happens in terms of students who are thinking about this in terms of getting a job? And Jennifer, you alluded to this before, and I realize it's a little controversial to ask this question so directly, but students are taking out a lot of loans, and is it unreasonable for them to think about what it is that they're doing today and how that's going to affect their job search later?
Sure. So at Drexel is all about experiential education. They have the co-op program where students are going out, working in a field of their interest. We also have a lot of experiential education that comes in the form of internships and service opportunities and things of that sort. So it absolutely is fair to say that those experiences can give students a leading edge over their peers at other institutions who don't have that type of hands-on experience in the workforce, out in the real world period. So it is a value, definitely, whether it's paid or unpaid, and that often becomes the question as well, whether or not an internship is paid and what does that mean. Of course, we love for our students to get paid internships and work in that area, but sometimes they're not. And what does that mean? It means that the student is getting experience. They're supposed to be having a meaningful relationship with a mentor who's coaching them through the process of being a member of a workforce. So.
Fair enough. Well, speaking about paid and unpaid, there's some controversy, as you well know, about, especially from the labor perspective, that a lot of students are essentially taking jobs that would have gone to full-time workers. Is that true? Is that not true?
Sure. So it is, that definitely is an issue that comes up often. I think you have to take a hard look at what the internship students are actually fulfilling, if they ever would have been a real job at all. Oftentimes, nonprofits, small businesses take on interns to help them a bit, yes. They don't have the means to bring on a full-time worker, but they're also looking at the educational component, that they're offering a student a chance to work in an environment that hopefully will lead to benefit in their future. So I think the question remains whether or not those would ever be jobs in the first place. So.
And Jeff, where do you come down on this internship debate?
Well, they're in favor of the internships that they can get.
Good answer.
I just want to underscore just the value of that real world experience that a young person can get doing an internship, running a community service or participating in a community service project, or organizing a club on campus. Those are all give students real-world skills that will give them a leg up in the job market. When an employer is looking at someone's resume and they see more than just the academic work that they've done, but they see that they have, writing skills or communication skills that they gain through organizing a club or writing letters to the editor, even in ways that you wouldn't necessarily imagine. I'm sure the students who are putting together the community farm did some publicity for it. All of those things are giving young people a leg up and experience that employers notice and people in academia notice as well.
Well, speaking of that, Jeff, do you track your JSA graduates to see whether or not they go off to college and then graduate school?
We're looking for a grant to do some better tracking on our alumni. We unfortunately haven't done any sort of study about that, but I can tell you anecdotally, when we asked our students, are you looking to go off to a four-year institution, 80–90% of our members are going to a four-year academic institution after they graduate from high school. And nowadays, they're also planning ahead to graduate school. So it's one of those environments where students come in, and I think sometimes the aspirations of some of the students rub off on other students. When you start talking about where you want to go to college, with other people who may or may not have thought about it, that just gets them thinking about it. So most of our students do go off to four-year institutions after they graduate.
Well, it's interesting because, my experience with JSA in terms of interacting with JSA students is that the students tend to be very academic. Now, it could just be because I'm interacting with them, the ones who come to a summer program, who are, very academic. Is that a different?
Yeah, we do have two components to our program. That year-round component where there are high school clubs on campus. Those clubs are open to anybody. Everyone's welcome to come to the meeting at lunchtime, talk about the issues, debate the issues, many of our chapters conduct voter registration drives, listen to political guest speakers, things like that. Our summer programs, which are conducted on university campuses, are really rigorous academic programs where students come and take college-level courses in political science or constitutional law, foreign policy. Those students are all looking to go to four-year institutions, and they're getting a leg up by coming to an academic summer program, experiencing college life for 3 or 4 weeks, and also experiencing what it's really like to be in a college course taught by a college professor.
Jennifer, do you think that organizations that continue to kind of bring kids together, like JSA, they have a leg up when they come to a school like Drexel?
I do think so. Having that, not only is it service experience and having an educational experience behind that, but students are more mature. They have a chance to grow. They have leadership skills, and that all looks great on a college resume. So yes, and then also it preps them to get immediately involved in programs on a college campus that work towards the same goal.
Fair enough. We only have about 2 or 3 minutes left, so I just wanted to see if both of you would give some last-minute tips to some students who may be watching who don't go to Drexel or aren't active in JSA. Aside from come to JSA or come to Drexel, what advice generally would you give in terms of how they should engage, how you think students should engage, and how you think families should help their students engage in civic dialogue through either your programs or generally?
Sure, I'll take a stab at that. First, I would say be aware. Find out what's going on in your community, in your school, in state, nation, wherever. And when you find an issue, when you find something that really piques your interest or gets under your skin, take the next step and be engaged. Do something about it. It could be very frustrating. The more knowledge that you get about something, if you don't have an avenue for actually trying to make a difference. What we try and do is make sure that not only students have the knowledge of what's going on, but then know how to follow up and make a difference in their communities, the state, the nation, or the world.
My piece of advice would just be to get involved in something that you really have interest in. Don't just do it for that'll look good on your resume or look good on your college application, but find an issue that really presses your buttons and find a way to engage.
But my final point on this is, let's say you want to engage, but it's outside of the mainstream.
Okay.
How do you advise a student handle that?
It's a good question. I think a young student, a high school student, or a college student, well, a high school student, perhaps look towards the guidance of your parents to start. I think that would be the first thing. Hopefully they're your moral compass in the situation. But if it's a educate yourself about the issue. Make sure you really understand both sides before you plop yourself down in between one of them.
And I think that's good advice. And one of the things that I always advise my students is that, especially when they write things, those papers and those articles last forever.
They do.
And so it's important to articulate what you want and what you believe in, but also make sure that you're doing that in a reasoned way. And I think both of you have come on to explain why that's so important. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
If you would like additional information about the Junior Statesmen Foundation or the Lindy Center for Civic Engagement at Drexel University, please visit jsa.org or drexel.edu/Lindy Center. If you have comments or suggestions about higher education today, please send an email to our viewer mailbox at highereducationtoday@topcolleges.com. Thank you for watching. We will continue to bring you quality discussions about important matters in today's college and university world. Please join me again for another edition of Higher Education Today. I'm Steven Roy Goodman, and you've been watching Higher Education Today.